The judge's gavel hit the bench, and I watched three faces drain of color at once. My stepfather Arthur, his mistress Darlene, and his mother Ruth had walked into that courtroom like they owned it. Laughing. Actually laughing. Like this was some kind of social event instead of the moment that would decide whether my mother kept anything my father had left her. They sat across from us in their designer clothes, Ruth's pearls catching the fluorescent lights, Darlene's red lipstick perfect as a knife wound. Arthur wore that smirk I'd come to hate over the past 5 years. The smirk that said he'd already won. But then the judge said one word that wiped every trace of smugness off their faces. Karma. I'm Nathan Cole, 58 years old, and I've learned something most people figure out too late. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it shows up at your mother's door with flowers and compliments, calling it self-love while it picks the locks on her bank accounts. My father died of cancer 10 years back. He left Mom comfortable. More than comfortable. The house on the coast where I grew up, rental properties scattered across 3 counties, and a trust worth over $3 million. Dad was careful. Methodical. He told me once, sitting on the back porch watching the waves, "This is for your mother first, then for you. Keep it safe." I tried. God knows I tried. Mom handled it well for years. She kept the books balanced, collected rent, lived simply. But lonely gets heavy after a while, especially for someone who'd spent 30 years with a partner. When Arthur Reeves showed up at her church fundraiser, smooth-talking and attentive, I saw the change in her almost immediately. "Nathan, he makes me feel young again," she told me over coffee one Sunday. Her eyes had that light I hadn't seen since Dad got sick. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. But something about Arthur felt wrong from the start. The way he laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny. How he'd steer conversations toward money without making it obvious. The insurance business he supposedly ran, but never seemed to actually work at. "Mom, you barely know this guy," I said carefully. "Maybe slow down a little?" She patted my hand like I was still 10 years old. "You worry too much. Arthur is wonderful. You'll see." 6 months later, they were married. 3 months after that, Arthur moved into the house Dad built. And that's when things started disappearing. Not physically at first. Just on paper. Property deeds that used to have Mom's name suddenly showed Arthur's too. Bank accounts got consolidated for tax purposes. Investment portfolios got streamlined by Arthur's financial advisor, who turned out to be his cousin. Every time I asked questions, Arthur had answers ready. Professional-sounding answers full of words like optimization and estate planning and asset protection. Mom would nod along, trusting, while I felt my father's legacy slipping through my fingers like water. Then his mother Ruth started visiting. That woman looked at our family home like she was already redecorating it in her head. She'd run her fingers along Mom's furniture, commenting on how outdated everything was, how Arthur deserved better. And then came Darlene. Arthur introduced her as his business associate. Said they were working on some new insurance contracts together. But business associates don't look at married men the way Darlene looked at Arthur. And married men don't take business associates to restaurants 2 towns over where nobody knows them. The day I caught them together, I'd stopped by to fix a leaking pipe in the kitchen. Mom was at her book club. I walked into the living room and found Arthur on the couch with Darlene practically in his lap, both of them laughing at something on his phone. They didn't even have the decency to look guilty. "Ever heard of knocking, Nathan?" Arthur said, that smirk already forming. My hands clenched. "You're cheating on my mother." He stood up slowly, adjusting his collar. "Careful with accusations like that. Wouldn't want to upset Helena with your paranoid theories." Darlene grabbed her purse, still smiling. Actually smiling. Like this was amusing to her. I wanted to hit him. Every muscle in my body wanted it. But guys like Arthur feed on that. They want you to lose control so they can play victim, turn your mother against you, make you the problem. So I walked out. But I stopped trying to reason with him that day. What I started doing was investigating. Private investigators aren't cheap, but Dad's trust had left me some money of my own. The investigator worked fast. Within 2 months, I had bank statements showing money flowing out of Mom's accounts into investments that didn't exist. Signatures on documents Mom swore she'd never seen. Phone records proving Arthur and Darlene were talking 50 times a week. And recordings. The investigator got recordings. When I showed Mom the evidence, she sat at the kitchen table and cried for 2 hours straight. Not angry crying. Broken crying. The kind that comes when you realize you've been made a fool of by someone you trusted completely. He said we were a team, she whispered, staring at the bank statements. He said he loved me. Filing for divorce was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Arthur exploded. Denied everything. Hired the most expensive lawyer in the county and started telling everyone I'd manipulated Mom, turned her against him, poisoned her mind with lies. Ruth backed him up at every turn. Darlene suddenly became a constant presence, attending depositions, whispering in Arthur's ear. The three of them formed this unholy alliance, showing up to every hearing like they were attending a party instead of a legal battle. And they laughed. That's what got me most. They actually laughed in court like this was all some big joke they were winning. Until that Friday morning when everything changed. The final hearing was supposed to be routine. Asset division, settlement terms, maybe some alimony discussion. Mom's lawyer had the recordings ready, but wasn't sure the judge would allow them. We arrived early. Mom was shaking as we walked into the courtroom. Across the aisle, Arthur sat between Ruth and Darlene, all three of them dressed like they'd won already. Ruth's pearls, Darlene's red lipstick, Arthur's expensive suit. When the judge walked in, they didn't even stop whispering to each other. That should have been their first clue they were in trouble. But arrogance makes people stupid. The proceedings started slow. Property assessments. Account valuations. Arthur's lawyer argued that Mom had willingly transferred assets, that she'd understood every document she signed. Mrs. Reeves, the judge asked, "Did you understand these property transfers?" Mom's voice was quiet but steady. "No, Your Honor. Arthur told me they were for taxes." I trusted him. From across the aisle came a laugh. Quiet but clear. Arthur, shaking his head like Mom was performing badly rehearsed lines. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Reeves, is something amusing?" That's when Mom's lawyer stood up and said the words that changed everything. "Your Honor, we have new evidence. Bank records and recorded conversations between Mr. Reeves and Ms. Hunt." The courtroom went dead quiet. Ruth's face went white. Darlene stared at her hands. And Arthur's smirk finally disappeared. But what came next was something none of us expected. Arthur's lawyer was sweating. Actually sweating, fumbling through papers like a miracle might save his client. But then the second recording played. Arthur's voice, clear and cold, talking to his mother Ruth about moving Mom into a care facility once the house was transferred. Saying she was getting senile anyway. Mom gasped beside me, gripping my hand until it hurt. Ruth's smugness vanished. She stared ahead, rigid and pale. Darlene tried to stand, but the judge's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down, Miss Hunt." The judge studied the trio like they were insects pinned to a board. Arthur, the once charming con man, looked like a boy caught stealing, but this wasn't cookies. It was $3 million and a woman's life. "Mr. Reeves," the judge said slowly, "you understand that financial exploitation of a spouse, especially a senior, isn't just divorce grounds. It's criminal." Arthur stammered, claiming the recordings were jokes, taken out of context. The context, the judge cut in, is you bragging about theft and institutionalizing your wife against her will. The silence that followed was heavy. Arthur tried one more time. "I love Helena. I was protecting her assets." The judge didn't blink. "Protecting them for yourself." Mom's lawyer stood. "We request full restoration of Mrs. Reeves's assets, removal of Arthur from all deeds, and a forensic audit of his accounts." "Granted," the judge said immediately. Ruth let out a broken sound. The judge continued, voice like steel. "All accounts in Mr. Reeves's name are frozen pending investigation. Elder abuse will not be tolerated. You thought you'd already won, Mr. Reeves. But life," he paused, eyes sweeping over Arthur, Ruth, and Darlene, has a way of balancing the scales. Call it justice. Call it consequence. Call it karma. The words struck like a hammer. Arthur's face collapsed. Darlene trembled. Ruth clutched her pearls. Beside me, Mom straightened her shoulders, finally herself again. The gavel fell.
Court adjourned.
Arthur sat frozen while Ruth dragged Darlene toward the exit, both looking decades older. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Someone had leaked the tapes. By morning, it would be everywhere. Mom ignored them all. She stepped into the cold October air and breathed deep. "I believed him," she said quietly. "He held my hand at your father's grave. Used David's memory to steal from me." Before I could speak, security led Arthur past us. His face was red, his jaw tight. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You poisoned her against me. You'll regret this." The guard yanked him forward. Ruth and Darlene waited by a car that probably wouldn't be theirs much longer. Mom watched them go. "Do you think he actually loved me? Even a little?" "No," I said. "Men like Arthur don't love people. They love what people can give them." She nodded slowly. The judge was right. About karma. We stood there under the gray October sky. She looked smaller but stronger, something broken starting to mend. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we go home," I said. "And get your life back." She squeezed my arm. "Thank you for not giving up on me. You're my mother." Giving up wasn't an option. As we walked to my truck, Ruth's car still sat in the lot. Inside, Arthur stared blankly ahead. Darlene hid her face. Ruth looked ghost-white. Let them feel what Mom had felt. Loss, humiliation, collapse. That night, after settling Mom in at my place, I sat on the porch with cold coffee, phone buzzing nonstop, friends, family, reporters. The story had exploded. Arthur Reeves, the charming widower's husband, was about to become infamous. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt drained. Watching someone you love get torn apart by a con artist doesn't end cleanly. It just leaves scars. Then the phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Nathan Cole. A clipped, professional voice asked. "This is Detective Sarah Chen, Financial Crimes Unit. We need to talk about your stepfather." My pulse jumped. "What about him?" "We've been investigating Arthur Reeves for 6 months. Your mother isn't his first victim." The words hit like ice. "What?" "There are 3 other women. Same pattern. Marriage, asset transfer, abandonment. He's done this before. We need your help to make sure he doesn't do it again." My grip tightened on the phone. "You'll have everything. Every file. Every recording. My mother will testify." "Good," Chen said. "Because Arthur Reeves is about to learn that karma doesn't just balance scales. Sometimes it crushes you under them." When I hung up, I sat in the dark, thinking about those 3 women, about how many more there might be, scattered across the years, their stories buried in shame. Arthur had left a trail of wreckage, and this courtroom victory, wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of uncovering how deep his deceit went. Detective Chin showed up 2 days later with a folder thick as a brick and a stack of photographs she spread across my kitchen table while Mom kept pouring coffee with shaking hands, busying herself to keep the panic down. "Linda Morrison," Chin said, tapping the first photo. "Married Arthur in 2015. Widow, inheritance from her late husband's construction company. Arthur convinced her to invest in a commercial property. The property didn't exist. Mom set the pot down hard. How much? 1.2 million. The number sat in the air like a weight. Mom gripped the counter. Chun flipped another picture. Patricia Nguyen, 2017. Husband had life insurance and a paid-off home. Arthur got her to take out a reverse mortgage, pocketed the funds, and filed for divorce 6 months later. She lost her house? I asked. Everything. She's living with her daughter. The next photo was of a kind-faced older woman, the kind of face that looked like my mother. Margaret Weston, 2019. Retired teacher. Arthur married her, moved his mother Ruth in within 3 months, isolated her from friends and family, By the time she realized, her accounts were empty. Mom slid into a chair. Ruth helped him. Ruth's been his partner in this from the start. Plays the concerned mother-in-law, gains trust, pushes the narrative that she's on the wife's side while Arthur empties the accounts. Then they move on. Chen's voice was flat. And Darlene Hunt is new. She's been helping identify marks, mapping social groups, churches who's worth targeting. The coffee sat cold. I watched Mom process the photographs, the meet cute at a church fundraiser, the whirlwind romance, the marital paperwork. Each moment revealed as calculated. None of it real. Did they press charges? Mom asked. Chen's face tightened. Linda Morrison died before trial. Heart attack, stress, according to doctors. Patricia was too ashamed and dropped the charges. Margaret attempted suicide. She survived but cannot testify. Silence filled the kitchen. Mom stared at the faces of women who'd walked the same path she'd nearly walked. He kills people, she whispered. Not with his hands, but he kills them anyway. Yes, Chen said. That's why we need you. You're the first victim who can and will fight. You have evidence and courage. Mom looked at me without speaking. I nodded. We finish this. She turned back to Chen. What do you need? Testify. Let a jury see the human cost. The recordings help, but juries need to hear you. Trial's set for 6 weeks. They'll try to delay, but the judge isn't having it. I won't lie. They'll try to humiliate you, make you look foolish. They'll dig into your past, your marriage to your first husband, your relationship with your son. But Arthur's had 3 victims already. He's not getting a 4th. After Chen left, the photographs were gone, but their ghosts remained. Linda's death, Patricia's homelessness, Margaret's brokenness. Mom called herself lucky. I called her a survivor. She didn't accept it easily. That night, sleep didn't come. At 2 a.m. my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Stop now, or your mother gets hurt. This is your only warning. I screenshot it and forwarded it to Chen. Her reply was fast. Expected. Don't engage. Installing security tomorrow. He's scared.
Good.
Arthur, who'd sauntered into court with charm, was scared enough to send threats. Desperation makes predators reckless. I bolted the doors, checked windows, set my laptop to record the porch camera. I sat with my father's old bat across my lap, watching shadows. Around 4 a.m. a car rolled by slowly, no headlights, 40 seconds in front of the house. Silver sedan. Newer. Could have been nothing. Could have been reconnaissance. I texted Chen. Patrol was on the way. By sunrise, I'd been awake 24 hours. Mom found me on the couch with the bat. We got a threat, I said. Her face went pale. Maybe we should stop, she whispered. Maybe it's not worth. No, I set the bat down. That's what he wants. If we back down, he finds another lonely widow. Maybe the next one isn't as strong as you. Maybe the next one dies like Linda. Mom sat, breathing slow. When she opened her eyes, something had hardened. Okay, she said. We finish this. Whatever it takes. 2 hours later, Chen arrived with a security team and 2 officers. They installed cameras, changed locks, handed out panic buttons that linked straight to 911. This level of reaction, one uniformed officer said, suggests Mr. Reeves is more dangerous than we thought. Chen pulled me aside. We're putting a protective detail on your mother, 24/7 until the trial. You think he'd actually hurt her? I asked. Arthur Reeves has everything to lose and nothing left to bargain with. That makes him unpredictable, Chen said. Patricia Nguyen had her daughter's car keyed weeks before she dropped charges. Messages left on her voicemail. Intimidation is his specialty. He doesn't get his hands dirty, but makes sure victims know he could. The way she emphasized, alive, left a chill in my bones. This had moved beyond finance and shame. It was now about survival. We prepared. Collected every document, every recording. I slept in short bursts, monitored the cameras, made lists of witnesses. Mom rehearsed her testimony until her voice steadied, until the memory of a hand clasping hers at a graveside felt less like a dagger and more like the opening to a story she would tell in court. Sometimes I caught myself imagining the worst, how far Arthur would go to avoid a sentence that would expose him to the world. The threats, the surveillance, the car that had paused in front of our house at dawn, all signs of a man cornered. Desperate people escalate. Still, the resolve in our house changed the tenor of the fear. Not that it vanished. Fear fed the plan, but it had an edge now, a purpose. We weren't just waiting. We were acting. Phones forwarded to Chin, evidence cataloged, protective details standing by, cameras recording every approach. And yet the cliff remained. 6 weeks to trial. A man who had already left a trail of ruined lives. A judge who had frozen accounts, but could not unmake the deaths, the attempts, the shame. A mother who would have to relive her betrayal in public. A son who had to make sure she lived to tell it. How far would Arthur go to keep himself free? How far would we have to go to stop him? 3 days after the threats began, the first package appeared on Mom's porch, a plain brown box with no return address. Inside was her wedding album from Arthur. Every photo had been defaced, her face slashed through with black marker, words scrawled over the pages. Liar. Traitor.
You'll pay.
When Mom saw, she went pale. He broke in, she whispered. He took this. Chin arrived with a forensics team within the hour. They dusted for prints, took statements, but everyone knew it was pointless. Arthur was too meticulous. He's escalating, Chin said. The next day, another box came, this time filled with surveillance photos. Mom at the grocery store. Leaving church. Walking to my truck. Someone had been following her. Watching. When she saw the images, her coffee mug slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. He's going to kill me, she said. I tried to sound calm. He's trying to scare you. That's all. It's working, she whispered. Her eyes were hollow, her hands trembling. Arthur was still killing her, just slowly, from a distance. I reminded her that backing down meant letting him win. She nodded, but I saw the doubt creeping in. Chun stationed officers at the house, one in front, one in back, but instead of comfort, their presence felt like confirmation that Arthur still controlled the air we breathed. As the trial drew closer, Mom rehearsed her testimony day after day. Each session drained her. He'll be there, she said one night. Staring at me. I'll be there too, I told her. He doesn't need to touch me to hurt me, she said quietly. 1 week before trial, a third package came, to my office this time. Inside was a folder stuffed with forged tax returns and bank statements, all designed to make it look like I had stolen from Mom. He's flipping the story, Chin said grimly. He'll accuse you in court, claim you manipulated her out of greed. I felt anger more than fear. But Mom, she looked stricken. He'll make you the villain. Let him try, I said. The truth won't change. Still, Arthur's poison worked its way into every shadow. Even the truth felt fragile under the weight of his lies. 2 days before trial, Ruth showed up, Arthur's mother, feral with fury. She stood on the sidewalk screaming until the officers let her speak. You're destroying my son's life, she shouted. He loved you. Mom's voice was steady. He gave me lies. He gave me fear. Ruth's face twisted. You're just a bitter woman. Arthur could have had anyone. You poisoned him against your own son. Your son is a thief, Mom said. And you helped him do it. Ruth lunged forward, but the officer stopped her. You'll regret this, she hissed. When Arthur walks free, you'll wish you'd kept quiet. After she left, Mom leaned against the door, shaking. She really believes it. Or she knows the truth and can't face it, I said. That night, no one slept. The trial was all over the news, the romance scam trial. Arthur's face on every screen. Comment sections split in half. Sympathy for the victims, mockery for their gullibility. Don't read that, I told her, but she already had. People think they're too smart to be conned, she murmured. They'll never understand.
You're not stupid, I said.
I know, but they don't. She sank onto the couch beside me. Tomorrow I have to stand there and explain how I loved the man who ruined me. And half that jury will think I deserved it. The other half will see the truth. She looked at me, tired eyes full of doubt. What if the wrong half decides? Arthur was charming, always had been. He could twist any truth until it favored him. That was what made him dangerous. Your father used to say, Mom whispered, that evil people don't think they're evil. They just think they're right. And Arthur believes he's right, I said. That's what makes him so hard to fight. Outside, the officers changed shifts, radios crackling. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of dread. Chun texted, "Evidence is solid. She'll do great."
Get some rest.
Easy for her to say. Tomorrow, we'd walk into a courtroom where Arthur would sit smiling, ready to twist everything. I thought about the other women, Linda, Patricia, Margaret, names that had become cautionary tales, ghosts of what Arthur had done. Tomorrow, Mom would try to make sure there wasn't a fourth. But justice isn't guaranteed. Not when the villain can still charm a room full of strangers. As I watched the night stretch out around us, I realized justice might not come on its own. Maybe karma needed help. Maybe tomorrow, in that courtroom, it would finally get it. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and fear. Mom sat rigid at the prosecution table, wearing the navy blue suit Chen had suggested. Conservative.
Trustworthy.
The kind of outfit that said, "I'm a victim, not a participant." Her hands were folded, so tight her knuckles had gone white. Arthur walked in wearing an expensive gray suit, clean-shaven, hair perfect. He looked like someone's favorite uncle, not a con artist facing 15 years. He smiled at the jury as he sat down. Actually smiled. Like this was a business meeting and not his reckoning. Ruth sat 3 rows back with Darlene. Both dressed in black like they were attending a funeral. Maybe they were. The funeral of their scam. Judge Morrison, no relation to Linda, called the court to order. The same judge from the divorce hearing. He'd remembered Arthur's arrogance, his smirk, his casual dismissal of evidence. That gave me hope. Not much, but enough. The prosecutor stood. Young guy named Marcus Webb, sharp-eyed and methodical. Chen said he built his career on financial crimes. Said he was good.
We'd see.
Ladies and gentlemen, Webb began, this case is about trust. About how Arthur Reeves systematically identified, targeted, and financially destroyed 4 women whose only crime was believing his lies. Arthur's lawyer, a slick-looking woman named Patricia Vance, objected immediately. Speculation and inflammatory language. Overruled. Judge Morrison said, "Continue, Mr. Webb." Webb laid it out piece by piece. The pattern, the method, how Arthur found wealthy widows, charmed them, married them quickly, and drained their assets before moving on. He showed financial records, property transfers, bank statements. The evidence stacked up like bricks building a wall. Then came the recordings. The courtroom went silent as Arthur's voice filled the space. Bragging to Darlene about outsmarting the old woman. Discussing with Ruth how they'd move Mom into a care facility. Laughing about how Nathan would crawl back begging. I watched the jury. Saw faces harden. Saw one older woman shake her head in disgust. Saw a middle-aged man's jaw clench. Arthur kept his expression neutral, but sweat had started forming on his forehead. Vance tried to object, claimed the recordings were obtained illegally. Judge Morrison denied it. The investigator I'd hired had followed every rule, gotten every permission. The recordings were clean. Next came the other victims. Patricia Nguyen testified by a video conference, too ashamed to appear in person. She described how Arthur had swept her off her feet 6 months after her husband died. How he'd convinced her to mortgage her paid-off house. How he'd disappeared with the money and filed for divorce from another state. "Did you suspect anything?" Webb asked. Patricia's voice broke.
No.
He was kind, attentive. He went to my husband's grave with me. He cried with me. How do you suspect someone like that? The jury looked at Arthur. He stared at the table. Margaret Weston's daughter testified next. Described finding her mother unconscious from pills, a note nearby that blamed Arthur Reeves for stealing her will to live. Described the long recovery, the therapy, the fear that still haunted her mother years later. "She won't leave the house now," the daughter said, crying. "She's too afraid someone else will hurt her." Arthur shifted in his seat. whispered something to Vance. She shook her head. Then it was Mom's turn. She stood slowly, walked to the witness stand with her head up.
Chun had coached her on this.
Don't look at Arthur. Look at the jury. Tell your story clearly. Don't apologize for being trusting. Webb started gentle. Background questions. How she met Arthur.
The courtship.
The wedding. Making it sound normal, romantic even. Establishing that Mom had been a reasonable person making reasonable decisions based on the information she had. Then he got specific. Mrs. Reeves, when did you first notice money missing from your accounts? Mom's voice was steady. About 6 months after we married. I went to transfer funds for property taxes, and the account balance was lower than expected. What did your husband say when you asked about it? He said he'd moved money into better investments. That I didn't need to worry about details. He was handling everything. Did you trust him?
Yes.
He was my husband. We'd made vows. Webb walked her through it step by step. The property transfers. The fake investments. The joint accounts Arthur had opened and drained. The documents she'd signed without understanding because Arthur had rushed her, told her it was just paperwork. Did you know he was having an affair? Webb asked. Mom's composure cracked slightly. None till my son caught them together. How did that make you feel? Betrayed. Foolish. Like everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. Webb let that sit for a moment. Then, Mrs. Reeves, if you could say anything to the jury about who Arthur Reeves really is, what would it be? Mom looked directly at them. He's a predator. He finds lonely women, makes them trust him, and destroys their lives. And he does it without feeling anything because to him, we're not people. We're opportunities. Vance objected. Judge Morrison overruled. Then came cross-examination. Vance stood, all sharp edges and calculated sympathy. Mrs. Reeves, you were married for 10 years before your first husband passed, correct? Yes. And he managed all the finances during that marriage? We managed them together. But he made the major decisions? Investments, property purchases? Sometimes. We discussed everything. So you've never been particularly financially savvy, have you? Mom's jaw tightened. I understand money, just fine.
Do you?
Because you signed multiple documents transferring assets to my client without reading them carefully. That suggests a certain carelessness with financial matters. I trusted my husband. That's not carelessness. Or perhaps it's naivety. 3 weeks after Arthur's sentencing, a woman named Carol Mitchell appeared at my office, clutching her purse like a lifeline. She'd read about the trial about Arthur Reeves and said softly, he almost got me too. 2 years before he met my mother, Carol had met Arthur at a grief support group. Photos showed them smiling, dancing, his charm the same as ever. Her daughter, a forensic accountant, had exposed his lies before Carol married him. If she hadn't, Carol whispered, he would have taken everything. She wanted to help find others, women like her who'd escaped. Her lead uncovered 6 more. Some had dated him briefly, others nearly married him. One had been engaged before her son intervened. With Detective Chen's help, we documented 9 additional victims. Arthur's scheme stretched back to 2008, 17 years of targeting grieving widows. Mom was crushed. 17 years. How many didn't escape? We'd never know. Arthur had turned grief into opportunity, love into theft, and nearly got away with it. The story went national. Mom became a reluctant symbol, the widow who fought back. She gave careful interviews, always reminding others that silence feeds predators. If one woman sees this and gets out before it's too late, she told reporters, it's worth it. But fame came with venom. Letters arrived, some kind, many cruel. Strangers called her foolish, greedy, complicit. Everyone thinks they're too smart to be fooled, Mom sighed, tossing another hateful note away. Until they are. Then Hollywood came knocking. A producer offered money for her story. She refused. I'm not profiting off other women's pain. They made the movie anyway, The Widow Thief. The actress playing Mom looked fragile, pitiful. She watched the trailer once, then never again. Meanwhile, Ruth vanished after sentencing, her home foreclosed, her number gone. Darlene resurfaced in Nevada, arrested for wire fraud, running new cons they never stop, Chin said grimly. Arthur won't either. That thought festered. Arthur, behind bars, plotting his next con. 15 years felt too short. I visited him once, unsure why. Maybe to see the monster stripped of his mask. He looked older, thinner, eyes cold. He stared at me, without speaking until I broke the silence. Do you feel any remorse? Arthur chuckled. For what? Making smart business decisions. You destroyed lives. I gave companionship. They invested willingly. Not my fault. His tone was casual, proud. My mother almost died from the stress you caused.
She made her own choices.
You poisoned her against me. He even smiled. Funny thing is, I liked Helena. If you hadn't interfered, we'd have been happy. While you drained her accounts, I managed our assets efficiently. There was no remorse, only delusion. He believed he was the victim, punished for being clever. As I stood to leave, he said softly, 15 years, maybe less. I'll still be young enough to start over. Next time, I'll be smarter about keeping sons out of the picture. A threat, smooth as ever. I reported it to Chun, who added a note to his file. But we both knew vigilance fades with time, and predators wait. Mom never asked about my visit. She'd moved back to the coast house, rebuilding piece by piece. Garden club, church, women's shelter. Still, sometimes she'd stare out at the sea, distant, like she was remembering or bracing. One evening, she said quietly, I think about it sometimes. When he's released, if he'll find me, I won't let him near you. You can't guard me forever, Nathan. And I don't want you to. He's taken enough. She was right. Fear was another cage. So we focused on moving forward, helping others, spreading awareness, turning Arthur's name into a warning label. Still, at night, I wondered about the unseen victims, the ones too broken to speak, too ashamed to surface. 6 months after the trial, Linda Morrison's daughter wrote to thank us. My mom never got justice, she said. I hope he suffers every day. I hoped so too. But Arthur didn't seem like a man who suffered. Men like him adapt. They bide their time. And in 15 years, or less, he'd be free again. That thought chilled me. Because I'd seen what Arthur could do with freedom, the devastation he could unleash with a smile and a lie. What would he do with both, and a grudge? The first year after Arthur's sentencing felt like learning to breathe again. Mom sold off most of Dad's old properties. She said she was done with the hassle, done with reminders of what she'd almost lost. She kept just the coast house and one small apartment building. I'm simplifying, she told me one quiet Saturday morning. Your father loved building. I just want peace. And peace looked good on her. The weight she'd lost during the trial crept back. The trembling in her hands stopped. She smiled again, slept again. But the phone never stopped ringing. Women who'd seen the trial. Widows starting to get suspicious of someone too perfect. Daughters worried about their mothers' new boyfriends. Even men defrauded by women running the same kind of game. Mom became an unofficial counselor, meeting victims in coffee shops, listening, warning them about the red flags she'd ignored. Some listened. Some didn't. You can't save everyone, I told her. I know, she said softly. But if I can save one, it's worth it. Then, that winter Detective Chin called. Ruth's dead. It took me a moment to understand. What? Heart attack. Motel in Arizona. Fake name. Working as a housekeeper. From pearls and luxury to motel sheets and aliases, Ruth's fall was complete. Does Arthur know? Prison notified him. He didn't ask to attend the funeral. Didn't care. Mom just shook her head. She enabled him, helped him destroy people. But she was still his mother. That's sad, in its own way. I couldn't agree. Ruth had known everything. She'd helped him do it. Sympathy felt wasted. But Mom still found compassion in ashes. Spring brought another shock. A reporter called, writing a major feature on romance scams targeting seniors. She wanted Mom's story. Mom agreed. Hours of interviews followed, the courtship, the manipulation, the trial. She even showed the defaced wedding album Arthur had mailed her from prison. 6 months later, the piece ran front page. The Widow's Thief: How One Man Stole Millions and Nearly Got Away with It. The response was massive. Calls from advocacy groups, survivors, and organizers. Requests for Mom to speak. She said yes to a few. She stood before rooms full of survivors, steady and calm, always ending with, "Predators count on shame to keep us silent. Don't give them that power. Tell your story. Press charges. Fight back." One woman in Cleveland wept as she thanked Mom. "I was engaged to Arthur Reeves in 2012. Called it off before the wedding.
I thought I made a mistake.
Now I know I saved my life." More stories surfaced. Women in Texas and Oregon, a man in Florida nearly conned out of his retirement. Arthur's reach stretched across decades and states. The victims who testified were only the surface. How many more? Mom whispered once. How many who never told anyone? We'd never know. But his name had become legend, a warning. In news, online, among advocacy groups, Arthur Reeves had become the symbol of what predatory charm looked like. That notoriety followed him behind bars. Other inmates knew. Men with mothers and grandmothers didn't like predators of widows. Word came through Chin. Arthur had been attacked twice. Nothing fatal, just enough to make him afraid. "Good," Mom said flatly. "Let him know what it's like to be vulnerable." Her tone startled me, but I understood. After years of living in fear, it was justice of its own kind. A movie about his crimes hit the festival circuit soon after, cheap, exploitative, and hated by critics. It disappeared within weeks. "At least they didn't profit off our pain," Mom said. Still, the spotlight lingered. Podcasts, documentaries, publishers, all calling. She turned down everything except a small publisher's offer, a book about healing after betrayal. Not Arthur's crimes, but how to rebuild afterward. That, she said, actually helps people. For a year she wrote, pouring herself into pages of reflection and hard-earned wisdom. The book sold modestly but resonated deeply. Therapists recommended it, survivors passed it around. A quiet success that mattered more than any headline. Then came the parole notice. Arthur's hearing was scheduled for year 12, 15 years total with good behavior. "He'll get out eventually," Chin warned. Best case, 8 more years. Worst case, the board lets him out early. "Can we stop it?" I asked. "You can testify. So can the other victims. But it's up to them." 8 years. Long enough for life to move on. Short enough for danger to return. I started preparing records, threats, transcripts, everything that proved he was still who he'd always been. A predator in a suit. Mom didn't share my urgency. If he gets out, he gets out. I can't live my life preparing for something that might never happen. But I could. And I would. I'd seen his eyes in the courtroom. Heard his arrogance in recordings. He'd learned nothing. Regretted nothing. He would do it all again. So I built the case quietly, piece by piece, readying for the day I'd face him again. Mom kept healing. Finished her tour. Spoke to hundreds of survivors. Told them they weren't stupid, just human. One evening, watching the sunset, she said, "Your father would have been proud. Not of what happened, but how I handled it." "He'd be furious at Arthur," I said. "And amazed at you." She smiled softly. "I wasn't strong at first. I was broken. But being broken and staying broken are two different things." That line stayed with me. Arthur had broken her, but she'd rebuilt herself, smarter, scarred, but unbowed. He'd wanted her silent and erased. Instead, she became a voice for thousands like her. That had to count for something. That had to be karma. Still, 8 years. 8 years until the next reckoning. Would that be enough time to keep him locked away? Or would Arthur Reeves, the man who made manipulation an art form, find a way to slip free again? Time would tell. And time, I'd learned, could be both a healer and a threat. By year 5 of Arthur's sentence, Life had started to resemble something normal again, until a new storm formed. A class action lawsuit surfaced against Arthur's old insurance company. They'd ignored years of complaints about his predatory practices, letting him keep operating long before he met Mom. The lawyer handling the case said she could claim damages for the company's negligence, but Mom refused at first. "I don't want their money," she said. "I just want them to change." When told she could make reform part of the settlement, she agreed. 15 other victims joined. 2 years later, they won a $3 million payout divided among them and, more importantly, a mandate for stricter industry regulations. Mom gave away her share entirely, donating every cent to organizations fighting financial elder abuse. "This money came from suffering," she told me. "Better it save someone else." The settlement made national headlines. Other companies followed suit, and new laws were proposed. It was the kind of victory Mom had prayed for, but it drew attention Arthur didn't deserve. Word reached him in prison, and he became fixated. According to his counselor, he ranted that the settlement belonged to him, that Mom had stolen his property. "He's getting worse," Chin warned. "The anger's festering." Then the vandalism began. Someone spray-painted thief across Mom's front door. Her car got keyed, garbage dumped on her lawn. Threats slipped into her mailbox. Police found nothing. Maybe random, maybe not. Maybe a message from one of Arthur's online sympathizers, people who twisted the truth until they painted him as a wronged man and Mom as a manipulative widow. Mom stayed calm. "People believe what they want," she said. "I know the truth. But I tightened security anyway, cameras, locks, alarms wired straight to the police." Still, the harassment persisted, small but cruel reminders that Arthur's shadow stretched further than his prison cell. Mom refused to cower. Instead, she got louder. She founded a nonprofit to help victims of financial abuse, legal aid, therapy, recovery programs. It grew faster than we imagined. In its first year alone, it helped 32 people reclaim stolen assets and file charges against their abusers. "This is your father's real legacy," she told me at the nonprofit's anniversary gala. "Not the houses, not the money. This." And she was right. Dad had built security for his family. Mom had turned that foundation into justice for others. Arthur caught wind of her success and sent a letter from prison. 5 pages of venom. The guards intercepted it, but Chin showed me a copy. Arthur called Mom a thief, accused her of manipulating the system, and demanded restitution for his stolen freedom. The prison psychiatrist later diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and delusional thinking. Chin thought it could help our case. If he's deemed unstable, the parole board might deny early release. So we began compiling everything: letters, threats, recorded calls, building a dossier that showed Arthur was still dangerous, still manipulative, still unrepentant. Meanwhile, Darlene, Arthur's old partner, got arrested in Nevada for fraud, 8 years in prison. Her new accomplice got 12. "They learn from each other," Chin said grimly. "Like a contagion." But the contagion didn't stop there. A woman in Michigan was caught running a scam identical to Arthur's. She'd been corresponding with him for months, coaching, instructions, scripts, all from inside prison. The discovery shut down his communication privileges, but the damage was done. He'd infected another life, another set of victims. "He'll never stop," I told Mom. "Then we won't either," she replied. And we didn't. The nonprofit expanded to 3 states, training volunteers, partnering with law enforcement, tracking serial con artists. Every success felt like another wound in Arthur's legacy. He'd wanted to be remembered as brilliant, untouchable. Instead, he was a cautionary tale, a name whispered in warnings and survivor groups. Mom's book got reissued with a new chapter about the nonprofit's work. It sold better than before, and she funneled every royalty back into the cause. "Arthur took 2 years of my life," she told me one night, eyes on the horizon. "But he gave me purpose for the rest of it." "You're saying you're grateful?" I asked. "God, no. I'm saying I made meaning out of pain. That's different." And it was. She wasn't thankful for what he did. She was reclaiming power from it, refusing to live as a victim. She became a survivor, an advocate, a voice for those too ashamed to speak. Every person she helped was another brick in the fortress Arthur could never tear down. Maybe that was the real punishment, watching from a cage as the woman he tried to destroy became stronger, louder, unstoppable. Because karma wasn't always swift, it was slow, deliberate, patient. And with every life Mom helped, the scales kept shifting, inch by inch, until the man who built his empire on deceit was remembered only as a warning. 3 years left until his parole hearing. 3 years to prepare, to make sure the world remembered who he was, what he'd done. 3 years to ensure he never walked free again. But sometimes, at night, I'd catch myself wondering, was 3 years enough? Or was Arthur already working some angle, planting another seed in the dark, planning, as always, his next con? The call came at 2 in the morning, the kind of hour that only brings bad news. Nathan Cole? The voice was calm, official. This is Warden Michaels from Blackwater Correctional. There's been an incident involving Arthur Reeves. Arthur had been stabbed multiple times by another inmate. Critical condition. Hearing it didn't feel real at first. Arthur attacked. For a moment, all I felt was the quiet satisfaction of justice finally circling back, followed by the hollow realization that this wasn't over. When I asked if he'd live, the warden hesitated. Unknown. You're listed as next of kin. I'm not his family, I said, but it didn't matter. Someone had to make the calls. Chin answered immediately when I rang. I heard, she said. If he dies, this becomes a murder investigation. They'll look at you and your mother first. We had motive, sure, but not guilt. Still, we'd have to prove it. By sunrise, the news was everywhere. Convicted con artist stabbed in prison. Cameras parked outside Mom's house. Reporters shouting questions about revenge and justice. Online, strangers called Mom a vigilante. I didn't do anything, she whispered, trembling over her coffee. I know, I said. But we'll get a lawyer. Just in case. Arthur survived, barely. The attacker, Marcus Williams, was serving life for an unrelated crime. His grandmother had lost everything to a romance scammer years earlier. I wanted him to feel what they felt, Marcus told the guards. Footage proved he'd acted alone. No conspiracy. Just poetic justice in a concrete cage. Arthur's recovery was slow. He couldn't return to general population not after that. They placed him in protective custody. He's paranoid now, Chin reported. Won't eat. Won't talk. Just flinches at every sound. Good, I said and didn't take it back. He'd earned every nightmare. The parole hearing got pushed back, first 2 years, then 4. He refused therapy, refused to participate in rehabilitation. He just sat in his cell, rotting from the inside. He's disappearing into himself, a prison psychiatrist said. For a moment, I pitied him. Then I remembered Linda Morrison's grave, Margaret Weston's suicide attempt, Patricia Nguyen's empty house, and the pity vanished. Meanwhile, Mom's world had become the opposite of his. Her nonprofit grew into a national network. She spoke before Congress, helped pass new laws, trained victims to become advocates. Senators shook her hand and thanked her for saving lives. Arthur's greatest victim had become his permanent punishment. His legacy now was her strength. When Detective Chun retired after 8 years, Mom threw her a party filled with survivors. It started as one fraud case, Chun said. Now it's a movement. Proof that victims can fight back. She was right. Justice wasn't just the verdict. It was everything that happened after. 10 years after his sentencing, Arthur's parole hearing was finally scheduled. He was 62, gray-haired, hollow-eyed, a ghost of the man who once smiled through lies. Mom, Patricia Nguyen, and the Michigan victim all testified. We had every piece of evidence, every letter, every manipulation, every refusal to change. When it was Arthur's turn to speak, he stood slowly. I'm sorry, he said. I was wrong. The room went still. Mom's jaw clenched, eyes unreadable. Arthur looked at her directly. You trusted me. I betrayed that. I can't undo it, but I'm sorry. Was it real? Or just another performance? Hard to tell. The board deliberated for 30 minutes, then returned. Parole denied. Reevaluation in 5 years. Arthur didn't argue.
Didn't look at anyone.
Just let them lead him out, small, defeated, silent. Outside, reporters swarmed. Mom thanked the board, then walked past the microphones without looking back. In the car, she finally spoke. "Do you think he meant it?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he's just learned that charm doesn't work anymore." She exhaled softly. I almost felt sorry for him. "He made choices," I said. "Now he's living with them. That's not cruelty. That's justice." 5 more years. He'd be 67 before another hearing. Too old to charm anyone, too known to hide. By the time freedom came, it wouldn't mean much. He'd have walls without bars, recognition, infamy, memory, all keeping him caged long after the doors opened. Maybe that was karma's last gift, to make him live long enough to understand the pain he caused. Maybe that was enough. 15 years after Arthur's sentencing, Mom turned 75. We celebrated by the coast with her nonprofit team, old friends, and the detectives who'd stood by her through the worst years. Even Chin came out of retirement, smiling as Mom raised her glass. "Arthur tried to erase me," Mom said in her speech. "Instead, I'm standing here surrounded by people who've built systems to stop predators like him." The applause was thunderous. Arthur was still in prison, denied parole again, aging into frailty, diabetes, high blood pressure, a slow unraveling. Torres told me privately, he won't make it to his next hearing. I should have felt something. Relief. Closure. Instead, I just felt done with the shadow he'd cast for decades. When he dies, I asked Torres, does it end? "His crimes taught us how to stop others," he said. "That's how it ends." Arthur's evil had sparked reform. His scams became the blueprint for prevention. Mom's 3rd edition book was now required reading in universities and police academies. She'd turned pain into curriculum. Then one afternoon, a young woman appeared at her office. "My name is Sarah Reeves," she said quietly. "Arthur is my father." The room froze. She told us he'd abandoned her when she was 12, stolen from her mother, vanished. She'd only learned about his crimes through a documentary. "I came to apologize for what he did," she said, trembling. "I carry his name. What if I'm like him?" Mom stood, took her hands. "You're not defined by his choices," she said gently. "You're defined by what you do with them." Sarah whispered, "I help women escape abuse." "Then you've already answered your question." Sarah joined the nonprofit soon after, helping shape new training programs with insights only someone raised in that darkness could offer. "This is what healing looks like," Mom said. "Not revenge. Transformation." Months later, Sarah received a letter from Arthur. A personal apology, this time to her. No excuses. Just regret. "Is it real?" she asked. Mom read it. "Maybe. But you don't need his apology. You already took back your power."
Sarah didn't respond.
"Let him sit with it," she said, and that silence became his final punishment. Mom's nonprofit hit its 10th anniversary. Awards, national grants, standing ovations. But what she cherished most were the letters framed on the office walls. "You saved my grandmother's home. Your training exposed my fiancé's scam. My state passed a law because of your work." Each one erased a little more of Arthur's legacy. Then one morning Torres called. "Arthur's had a massive heart attack. He won't last the night." Mom thought quietly. "Should I go see him? Do you want to?"
"No," she said.
There's nothing left to say. Arthur Reeves died alone at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. No family. No friends.
Just a nurse noting the time.
News headlines focused not on him, but on what his victims built afterward. His obituary was 3 sentences long. Cremated. Forgotten. Sarah cried anyway. "He was still my father. I hoped he'd find peace before the end." "Maybe he did," Mom said softly. "But peace doesn't erase the past." The contrast struck me. My father's ashes had been scattered at the ocean, a place of life. Arthur's were buried in an unmarked prison lot. One man left love behind. The other, absence. "It's over," Mom said when the confirmation came. And for the first time, it really was. No more parole hearings. No more threats. No more looking over her shoulder. That night, she slept straight through. The nonprofit grew faster than ever. More states, more survivors. At a conference marking the verdict's anniversary, Mom stood before hundreds of advocates. Arthur Reeves took 2 years of my life, she said, but I've spent 15 taking power away from men like him. He tried to destroy me, and instead built the force that destroyed everything he stood for. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, we went back to the coast. Stood on the same beach where Dad's ashes had been scattered, where everything had started and ended. Your father would be proud, she said. We did good, didn't we? We did better than good. We turned pain into protection. She looked out at the horizon. That's karma, Nathan. Not revenge. Not punishment. Balance. He caused harm. We created healing. The scales evened. And they had, not perfectly, but enough. Linda Morrison, Patricia Nguyen, Margaret Weston, Zara, all of them had pieces of their lives back. Arthur's name had become a warning. Mom's had become hope. What happens now? I asked. We live, she said simply. Not in fear. Not in anger. Just live. We stayed until sunset, watching the waves erase our footprints. Arthur's legacy, washed away grain by grain. Mom's, shining steady like the tide. The story could have ended in bitterness. Instead, it ended in peace, with a woman who refused to stay a victim and a son who finally stopped looking back. Arthur Reeves died alone. Helena Cole lived surrounded by gratitude, strength, and love. That was karma's final word, not loud, not cinematic, just quiet justice done right. And as the sun sank into the water, we turned toward home, free, at last, from the shadow of his name.